Hello and welcome to Regionally Speaking. This series, entitled Stewards of Social Justice, will spotlight faculty, staff, and students of Case Western Reserve University who are actively engaged in the advancement of the university-wide Social Justice Institute. Today, we are talking with Jessie Hill, Professor of Law and Director of the Center for Social Justice at the Case Western Reserve University Law School. Her primary areas of teaching and scholarship are constitutional law and civil rights law, with a particular emphasis on issues of reproductive justice and religious freedom. Welcome, Jessie.
Thank you.
Let's begin with some personal history about your educational background and what drew you into the world of law and the areas that led to your primary areas of teaching and scholarship in constitutional law, civil rights law, and an emphasis on issues of reproductive justice and religious freedom. Does that give you enough to go on?
I think so. um, I actually originally I did my undergraduate studies in literature, comparative literature, and I had embarked on doing a PhD program in comparative literature initially. And one of my main interests within literature was always feminist theory. And so I think issues of equality and justice were kind of with me from the beginning in my scholarly path. But I actually ended up not finishing my program in comparative literature, my PhD program, and decided instead to go to law school. And of course, with any of these decisions, there's always a lot of different factors involved. But, I think one of the things that was really appealing to me about law school was that I could continue to do some of the things I loved in terms of reading and interpreting and studying texts essentially, but that there was a more practical focus, and that lawyers have a real impact on the world, and I really liked that there it's visible and sort of immediate in a lot of cases, and so I could continue to bring my interest in women's equality, particularly through reproductive freedom and reproductive justice, into my work in first practicing law and then later in teaching. And so I think, I guess religious freedom is another area of interest of mine, which I think I was more drawn to in law school. And I guess maybe the connection I see between the two is that they are both about sort of, I see them both, religious freedom and reproductive freedom, as being issues that are so fundamental to who we are as people, just very core personhood types of values. And I think both because they strike me as important, they're also areas where I think we need to be particularly attentive to equality, to treating people equally, and giving people equal opportunity to sort of have the same level of rights. And they're areas that in the reproductive rights realm, I think there are a lot of social and economic inequalities that happen. And I think in religious freedom, sometimes the dimensions are more along sort of religious minority majority lines. But I think it's a lot of the same concerns about how do we realize justice in these two areas.
Where did you do your undergraduate work and then law school?
Oh, so I did my undergraduate work at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, and then Harvard Law School.
And how was it that, at least at the point when you were thinking about going to law school, how did you make the decision for Harvard?
How did I decide to go to Harvard? I think, I had sort of been debating whether to go or not, and so I didn't to law school or to stay in my PhD program, and so I applied to a very limited number of schools, and I thought, if I don't get into one of these, I'm not going to go, and I ended up getting into Harvard, and I think I was very impressed with the wide range of opportunities there. It's a very big place with a real diversity of viewpoints and faculty and programs and enormous resources, and I really felt like I got a wonderful education there.
Hmm. You did feel very good about that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And then the journey continued.
Yeah, so I did a 1 year clerkship after law school, working for a federal appeals court judge here in Cleveland, Judge Karen Nelson Moore, who's on the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. And then after that, I spent some time as a fellow at the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU Reproductive Freedom Project in New York, where I litigated cases involving reproductive rights, access to abortion rights, primarily. And then I came back to Cleveland largely because I had met my husband while I was in my clerkship here. And so um, I came back. He was a resident at the Cleveland Clinic. And so I came back here and practiced law with a small sort of civil rights, plaintiff's side civil rights law firm in town for a while, and then was lucky enough to get into teaching and to get a position teaching here at Case Western.
And how long have you been here at Case?
Since 2003. Does that mean 8 years, I think? Yeah, or this is, yeah, 8 years. I think this is my 9th. I can't believe it's been that long. Where does it go?
Years ago.
Yeah.
And what about the path that you seem to have been following to do what you wanted to do? Has it been realized? And if so, or are there any areas that you think, there are new places and I want to go as far as exploring, and
Yeah.
the engagement with students is what I'm
Yeah.
interested in. I can tell that you're a
Yeah.
wonderful teacher,
Oh,
so
thank
there's
you.
no question about that. Your enthusiasm alone for what your background has come about. But what's your experience been?
I feel really lucky to be able to be in this field and to be teaching. It's been really, really wonderful, and I think one of the things that I hope I'm able to do, when you start teaching, it takes a while to get over the just to sort of get comfortable with it, right? To get to a certain comfort level in class and getting used to teaching and getting up there, every day or 3 or 4 times a week. Now I think the thing that I'm trying to do or hoping to develop is to really sort of inspire students to see the law as a tool of social justice, really. And it's funny, in law we talk about the justice system. We say justice. We sort of think on some level everything we do is about justice, right? But that word has so many meanings, and we don't necessarily always think about whether we are really doing justice in a given case. And so that's something that I really want to push students to consider. And for example, I teach a course on civil rights law every so often, about every other year, and I find that it's sort of this opportunity to make students recognize that the courts, and particularly the federal courts, but the civil rights cases, I guess, are one area in American society where the powerless can actually still win against the powerful. And not always, and it's not always, you don't always get the right result, and sometimes there are huge pockets of injustice and unfairness even within our civil rights law. But sometimes, you can really still change the world, and you can really still make a difference for people who don't have power and who don't have a voice. And I think it's an amazing thing. And one thing I've done in that class is to bring in civil rights attorneys who are in practice, since I'm a little bit removed now, having been here for 9 years, and to get them to speak to the students about their cases and about their work and what they do, and that has worked. I did that for the first time this past year, and I found that it worked really, really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was going to ask you about that. Do you bring in people? I mean, you have tremendous enthusiasm for what you do, but to bring in the practicing, attorneys and to have them talk about it. Tell a little bit more about that. The student reaction, were they engaged in asking questions and
Yeah,
that sort of thing?
they were incredibly engaged. And I had a wonderful mix of attorneys, and some of them would come in and talk to the students and say, "Okay, client comes to you and tells you this is my problem. What do you do? Now what do you do? Now what do you think about next?" And that worked extremely well. It was a great way to get the students engaged. And the attorneys love it too. I mean,
Yes.
that's the amazing thing. They love the opportunity to come and talk to students. And I do also try to stay a little bit involved. I do a little bit of volunteer work with the ACLU of Ohio, and I've been involved in some reproductive rights litigation, but it's just not enough for it, for me to be able to bring all of that richness to the students. So yeah, it was very well received. Judging by the evaluations, they liked it a lot. I'm starting to feel a little jealous of some of the the reviews that my speakers got, but but that's okay.
But that's good. There's a very good side to all of that. And I say that because I've known of attorneys who have been invited, and they have not necessarily had an environment that was created by the instructor. I mean, you chose well, and you also knew your students well enough to know how that would work as well as you've just described. You've just described it. Well, I want to take a break now, and then when we come back, I want to talk more about your role as the director of the Center for Social Justice at the law school. So we'll take a moment and return quickly.